Mike Vardy, thanks so much for being on this nonprofit productivity summit. We're really excited because you're one of our favorite Canadians, but you're also an expert in productivity. And maybe we can start there by going into how does one even transition from a quote regular job to becoming the productivity-ist?
Well, I have to say, Mike, you're one of my favorite Mikes. I can only think of maybe one that might override you in that regard too. So I appreciate
Fair,
that.
fair.
Uh, so how did I transition from the day job into what I do now? It's an interesting story. I've told it in various ways before, but the idea is I was working at Costco as the manager of two very distinct departments in one very large building. So I was running the service deli, which is where the rotisserie chickens are all, made. And it's a very proactive environment there. You have to make the chicken pot pies and you have to predict and you have to have like a plan, right? Because otherwise you've got spoilage and, all that stuff. So that was one business I was running. But then I'd mosey on or shuffle or even occasionally run to the front of the building because I also ran the concession stand, the food court where you get the hot dog and soda for like $1.25 or whatever. And that's a very reactive area because most people don't go in there saying, I'm going to go buy, a hot dog and soda. Instead, they're, buying everything else and it happens to be the impulse buy on the way out. I will say that there were some people that definitely did do that because of the pricing, but that department, some days you would be, you had to time it right, but it was you couldn't prepare too far in advance. So I'm managing those two areas. I'm also fairly new to this part of the world that I live in now, Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. So I'm single. I'm trying to, meet a partner. I am also hanging out with my roommate who happens to be a forklift driver at Costco, but also decides that he wants to do some improv classes, says, you would be great at this, Mike, come along. And I had done comedy and stage and theater in high school and stuff. And I actually almost went to Second City in Toronto when I was back in Ontario, which is where I'm from. And as soon as I went back to improv, the bug was back. So now all of a sudden I'm trying to balance that stuff. And I'm like, and I was running ragged. I was trying to earn a living, build relationships, and foster my passion all at the same time. And I'm like, I need help. And that's when I started to discover the work of people like Stephen Covey. I remember even sitting up late night because I'm a night owl and watching like the Tony Robbins Get the Edge infomercials. I'm like, I need that program. I bought that program. And then from there, I bought the Time of Your Life, which was his time management program. And I started to really immerse myself in time management and productivity to the end of it became another project I started to pursue. So now all of a sudden it's no longer a means to an end, it's just a means. And so I kind of combined the idea of the comedy stuff that I wanted to do with this idea of productivity. Because back then there was a lot of productivity on the internet, like Gina Trapani was running Life Hacker. There was lots coming out in the early days, and Merlin Mann coined the phrase like it was like productivity overload, right? Like Merlin Mann was in the zeitgeist at that time. David Allen, who I know is part of this program as well. I followed his work. I got really into getting things done, and I realized that by exploring this stuff so much, I was not really getting anything more done. I was just learning a lot about how to get things done. So I thought, well, I'm gonna kind of piggyback on this idea. And I decided that when I was watching Stephen Colbert and the Colbert Report, when he used to parody, right-leaning political figures and pundits. And I said, I'm going to be this guy that starts this site. And it was called FTD at first, and F was EFF, and it was for efforting. So it was like efforting the dog is what it was. And it was all about like, it was basically a parody. It turned into eventualism. And that's when I started to do this like kind of Stephen Colbert-esque shtick. I actually met David through that because I interviewed him as this character. And through that, David, the people he was working with at the time, this is when GTD was like, it was stationed in Ohio and there was like an actual physical place you could go and all that stuff. And they said, hey, you know this stuff. In order to satirize it, you need to really know a lot about it. Do you want to start writing for us in a legitimate, fashion? I mean, you bring levity and fun to the mix. It can be a very dry topic. Would you like to do that? I said, sure. And so I started to write for the GTD Times, the Getting Things Done Times. So suddenly, as that snowball and domino, those dominoes started to fall, I became the very thing I was parodying. So I'm easing my way out of Costco. I went from management down to my last job there was the guy at the front door greeting people, right? Like that was my last job there, closest to the door as possible, low bandwidth, so I could focus on this new element of my career. I was still doing a bit of comedy. I'd met my wife at that point in time. We had a kid, and I was trying to balance all that stuff. And ultimately what happened was I furthered the transition from part-time Costco employee. I took another couple of jobs before I made the full leap and became the quote productivityist, which, is really a portmanteau of productivity and anything ending in IST. So for me, initially it was enthusiast, then it was specialist. Now it's more of a strategist. And that's kind of how I got to where I am now and how we're able to talk, because I can tell you, if I was still at Costco, I'd probably be in like Grand Prairie, Alberta, running a warehouse or something like that. Or if I went down the comedy stage, I'd be somewhere, earning a pittance to make people laugh. And I probably wouldn't be with my wife and be able to be with my kids. So I got that best of both worlds by doing this. And now I get to help people entertain them and inform them all at the same time. And often, especially over the last, let's say 18 months, I've been able to do it from the comfort of my study. So
A lot of nonprofit leaders, they feel like they have the best of both worlds too. They get to serve a mission, a cause, an organization that they're really passionate about. And hopefully they're able to, like you're saying, have meaningful relationships and cultivate friendships and make a life for themselves. One of the things that we hear a lot is they're feeling guilty about not being more productive in terms of time management. And one of the many reasons why we wanted you on the summit was you've really coined this idea of time crafting. And I'm hoping that you can unpack the difference between traditional time management and time crafting.
Well, and interestingly, one of those jobs, just real quick sidebar, was for a nonprofit. I actually worked for the Victoria Film Festival, and it was a nonprofit charitable organization. So that was the last job I had before I went full on into this. So I understand I wrote plenty of grants during the off season when we weren't actually delivering films. And it was actually, I think, during that time that some of the elements of time crafting really started to take hold. And what time crafting is to me is it's this idea that and it really kind of came to the fore, the title, the name of it, when I was walking with my son to school. And one of the cardinal things that you learn as a parent is never say, what are you going to do at school today, or how's school? Like, they don't want to talk about that. Instead, you talk about things that are interesting. And he was into Minecraft. And I didn't know much about the details of Minecraft. I knew what it was, but I didn't know how to play it and all that stuff. And I said, so tell me a bit about this Minecraft thing. And he starts to say, well, you take these like bare elements like dirt and wood and rock, and then you put them in a place, a crafting table, and you make something more useful out of it, like a sword or a chair or a bed. And as he's saying this to me, my comedy background starts to kick in, where I'm connecting the ordinary and the extraordinary. I'm like, so this is kind of like time, like the elements of the things that we use for time, like the to-do list and the calendar and the email and the note taking. I'm like, these are all things that we need to kind of put together, and the environment constantly changes. And as a craftsperson, as somebody who performed, as somebody who was, doing comedy, you never stop honing your craft. You never stop trying to get better. No one at the end of the day goes, well, I've done this. I don't need to. An actor doesn't say, well, I've mastered my craft, peace out. Like, they don't. There's always something. And the time is the same. Time is moving on, whether we wanted to or not. We have it until we don't. And I think one of the pitfalls of the term time management is that it basically is saying that we have to corral it. Like, management versus leadership are very different, right? Like a manager versus, like, say, a leader, there are some nuances there. So I'd rather lead my time, and through time crafting, I'm able to do it. Like, these simple, flexible, durable, sustainable kind of, practices, tactics, whatever you want to call it, allows me to kind of move with time and kind of see where it's taking me, but also lead it to where I want it to go. because it's an ongoing process. So I'm maybe not as focused as much on the outcomes as I am on the journey along the way, which has ultimately led to better outcomes. And I think that's what time crafting does, is you're never going to be done time crafting until you are no longer, with us, when your time is up. And I think if you keep that in mind, then it becomes a lifelong journey as opposed to this thing that you just have to do.
And one thing I tell people is you're probably doing a little bit better than you think. It's just that we can play the comparison game and look online and we think everybody else is so much more productive. So it sounds like it's kind of not just paying attention to your tools, but also trying to get better at some of the habits. And can you give us a sense of what might a couple of those habits be?
Well, yeah, and I think truthfully, what it brings it back to is what productivity really is. And I don't think productivity is, most people think productivity is about efficiency, effectiveness, like checking off all the boxes. Productivity, as someone who's studied this for well over a decade now, and has learned at the side of like mentors like David Allen and Covey, and Oliver Berkman talks about this in his latest book, 4,000 Weeks, which is a phenomenal book because it just kind of makes you realize, oh, how do I do this as a human, right? And I think the elements of productivity, as it's been defined in a lot of ways, is rather inhumane, right? We have to do as much as we can. The world is moving so fast. Keep up, keep up, keep up. I think productivity is really just the active linking between your intention or intentions and your attention, which you both have agency over. You can decide what your intention is, and you can decide how much attention you want to pay to it. But it does take certain elements to make those things link. And the wider the gap between that link, the harder it is to get your intentions done. And something I say often is intention without attention is powerless, and attention without intention is aimless, right? And we often fall prey to one of those, more often than not, the attention piece. And I think that habit in and of itself is something we need to cultivate, paying attention, not just to the surroundings, but what's going on in here. David talks about mind like water, getting it out of your head. That skill of just capturing things so that you regret nothing, I think is really important, because you get it in front of you and you assess it. But we don't think about that as a habit per se. We think about, like, I need to exercise, I need to meditate, I need to, do yoga, I need to eat better. Capturing things, getting things out of your head makes all those other things more doable, because you realize the boundaries involved that you may need to set up. You realize the roadblocks that may come in place. You can even realize the cadence in which way you can do it, right? And then another habit that I think is worth fostering, and David talks about this in Getting Things Done as well, in terms of the form of a weekly review, which I've always struggled with. And I think anybody that's tried getting things done has, because of the daunting task that it may appear to be. The way that I've simplified it for myself is through the art of journaling, daily journaling, daily reflection, because course correcting when you journal daily is a whole lot easier than course correcting a week later, a month later, because you can see the patterns, right? Because really, if the calendar is the story of your days, or the story of your year or whatever, and the to-do list is like kind of the chronicle of what you did, then the journal really is the story of your life. Like it's something you could sit and read or pass on. Like, look at Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I mean, he never intended for that to be published per se. Like, it's not like he got a book deal to get Meditations out there. But when you read the work of like a Ryan Holiday or something like that, and you read that and you're like, oh, so the things we can learn from that story and from his struggles and challenges, we can apply. Well, you can learn that from your own as well, because the past version of you has made choices that the future version of you can benefit from. So I think journaling is a habit that is undervalued, underused, underappreciated, and it's not that hard to adopt. I mean, there is Intelligent Change has a journal called the 5-minute journal. If you take 5 minutes out of your day, and let's assume you sleep 8 hours, that's so 16 hours of your day. I think that's like 0.06% of your day to sit and journal for yourself. And I always get, and again, the training as a comedian helps. When people go, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't, journaling is weird. It's woo woo, all that stuff. I'm like, hey, do you publish on Instagram daily? Do you publish on Facebook? And they're like, yeah, with social media. I'm like, well, then you're journaling already. You're just journaling for the whole world. And aren't you, wouldn't you benefit from that yourself? And honestly, wouldn't places like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram benefit from maybe if we kept a journal of those things and then maybe kept some of that stuff out of the public spotlight? It's it could be very therapeutic. So if there's two habits that I think people should foster, it's the capture habit and the journaling habit. I think those ones will help you craft your time in ways that you could not possibly imagine until you get right into it.
Yeah, I think that idea of anything that contributes to more self-awareness and more self-reflection is going to pay dividends in the course of a busy workday. How about something like the use of a task manager? So does that help you have more attention and intention in terms of the work, as opposed to, oh, I'll just remember it, and oh yeah, I forgot about that, but I'll remember it tomorrow? And because I mean, you and I see this all the time where they think that they're a lot smarter than they are, and their noggins can contain everything. But we know that we need parking spaces for these projects and lists and whatever. We need places that we can trust to put these various ideas. Is that something too that might help with cultivating attention?
I think that the tools can help, but I think a lot of people get caught up in the tools. They figure that the tools are the solution. I was doing a workshop with someone and I was telling them that I use Todoist for my personal task manager and ClickUp for my professional one. And as of this recording, holy smokes, has ClickUp done well. They just scored
Yes,
like a
they
mess.
have.
And they've got some big plans, and I love what ClickUp's doing. But ClickUp is, again, that tool is great for me and my team because it scales exceedingly well. And I've got a multifaceted team across, multiple, countries, right? Todoist is great for just me. Like, it's the thing. And by segmenting those, I'm able to pay attention to my personal stuff, and my professional stuff lives here. So if I don't want to look at my professional stuff, I can give my attention specifically to my personal stuff. So someone said, well, that's why don't you just put it all in one? Like, that sounds like it's two systems. I'm like, it's not two systems, because the things that I use, like mode-based living, theming your time, those, like when I look at priority flags, I don't go priority 1, 2, 3, 4. I actually know what priority 1 in Todoist to me means. Oh, that equals important. Priority 2 equals that's urgent. So I use, again, that's a great thing about time crafting too, is it's not just like, this is Mike's model. It's like, oh, well, you should take elements of like the Covey matrix or the Eisenhower matrix, which is really where it roots from, right? You can take things like, when I talk about mode-based work and mode-based living, someone said that those sound a lot like context. I'm like, I think their contexts just elevated to a degree, or just different, whatever way you want to look at it. So there is no unique original tool or system that's out there anymore. But I think that digital tools are helpful for long-term storage, like you mentioned. So I want to get it out of my head, and I want to be able to find it quickly later, right? Like the bullet journal would be an example of a paper tool that people use this for, but I'm not a huge fan of that because I want to, again, minimize that gap, narrow that gap between my intention and my attention. That said, I use paper for immediate capture because I don't want to necessarily see all those things that pop up in my purview if I'm looking at Todoist or ClickUp. So again, anything that you can do to narrow the productivity gap between intention and attention. And really all the tools are ways for you to pay attention. That's all they are. The intentions are all up here, they're in, and they need to get out of here. And then they're wherever you put them. You have to have a simple way. Again, simple, flexible, durable, sustainable, to get it out of paper. So I actually have a way of looking at any piece of paper I've written something down on and go, oh, that's already been done. That's been moved to either Todoist or ClickUp. That's not going to be done. I decided I'm not going to do it. Oh, that doesn't have anything through it. I need to make a decision on that. So I can write it down anywhere and I can know, oh, this is what this means. So it's about creating those simple pathways. And to the end of to the idea of I'll remember that later, there is that primitive part of your brain that really wants to stay at those two lower levels of what Abraham Maslow calls like the hierarchy of needs. So the two lower levels are really basic needs, food, shelter, all that, and then safety and security. That's where they want to go. They don't want to go into the growth areas level 3 is about relationships. And, the animal kingdom does have relationships, but they have varying degrees of relationships, right? Level 4, self-esteem. Level 5, self-actualization. The primitive brain doesn't care about that. It just wants to survive. So when you have an idea that might take you to those higher levels that seem a bit challenging outside your comfort zone, it'll go, no, I'll remember that. Don't worry about it, which is a clue. And it should be a signal to go, no, I won't. Write it down. The other clues you get are, you get a task on your to-do list that says work on book. When you write it down that way, that's your primitive part of your brain going, I can't get that done today. Move on to something that you can do. No, break it down into the smaller. David talks about smaller steps. I say break a project down to its smallest particles, and that'll vary in degrees, because when you do that, you could figure out what you can delegate, what you can get rid of, what you actually can do. Plus there's varying levels of energy that would be required to do certain things. But the primitive part of your brain doesn't want to do that, because oh, that seems like more work. Now I have more things on my to-do list. No, you've just taken projects that were disguised as tasks and made them more visible. So you have the same amount of things on your to-do list that you did before. Right. It's just now way more visible. So you got to watch out for those tricks, and it takes training, because cognitive biases are real. And when we live in a busy world where things are coming at us, trying to vie for our attention all day long, taking 30 seconds or 10 or 15 seconds, just go, hold on a sec. Do I need to reply to that email right away? Or is this just manufactured urgency? Is this really urgent? Hold on a second. I know it says work on book. Let me break it down to like a few more steps and see what I could do. That's what you need to do. And that's how you narrow that gap. Tools can help, but at the end of the day, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to be able to make sure you have a framework down first that you can move. And that's why I've said it's got to be flexible and durable. If a to-do list app, if ClickUp was to shut down tomorrow, I could move to another tool and I'd be able to take time crafting with me, right? Same thing with getting things done. Same thing with a lot of these ones that have been tried, tested, and true and have remained timeless, right? So I caution people when they say, oh, I've got this tool, it's going to solve all my problems. So I can just, I can remove some of these habits, like the capture habit, the journaling habit, and some of these other ones. The tool will take care of it. Nope. It's often user error. So just be mindful of that. And sometimes it just takes like 10 seconds to breathe and go, hold on a second. Okay, now what? That's really all it is.
What I found is the best time management or the best task management tool is the one I actually use. Yep. rather than the newest one on the market. And yep. for Todoist users, I think they have this wonderful new live text feature where you can literally just import something that you've written down, and that's pretty fantastic new feature in Todoist. Mike, let's shift gears and talk about this idea you hinted at earlier of theming days. And a lot of nonprofit leaders feel like their work never really ends because the edges are very blurry. There's always more money to raise. There's always more problems to try to solve. And on one hand, that's why we got into this work, because we love trying to make a difference. On the other hand, it can be exhausting. So if you would unpack for us this idea of theming days, and then let's see if we can apply it to the schedule of a nonprofit leader.
So day theming and daily theming is one of the elements of a larger piece of time crafting called time theming. And there's really 5 that, you have the annual axiom, which is like kind of like your overarching focus for the year. Like, what's your mantra? What's your slogan? There's monthly theming, which is what's your overarching focus for the month. Then there's daily theming, which we'll talk about now, which is what's your overarching focus for the day. And what it does is it gives your brain a place to go when you start your day, and you create this new neural pathway for your brain to go, oh, this is what this day means. You're giving your day definition. So even in a blurry, dynamic day that has demands coming from external areas and so on and so forth, you can say, hold on, today's Friday. What does Friday mean? Friday is my maintenance day. I'll use my own personal example. Okay, so what maintenance tasks am I going to give my focus to? It doesn't mean I only do maintenance tasks. It's just an anchor. It's just an overarching focal point. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't have that open-ended question. What am I going to do today? Because the primitive brain loves that. It's like, well, here, do these easy things, you know? Whereas if I have a waypoint, well, it's maintenance day. Okay, what maintenance tasks am I going to do? I've already filtered my list down a bit, right? And the key to choosing a daily theme is to make sure, number one, that it's something that you can put enough inside that bucket. So I call this the Goldilocks factor. Like, you don't want it to be too hard, right? Like, where it's like, today's daily theme is Slack, right? Well, that would be terrible, because once you're out of things to do in Slack, you're like, well, now what? And then the primitive brain goes, all right, well, you can do whatever you want, right? You don't want it to be too soft either, like work or free, because then the primitive part of your brain goes, I can do what, like, there's not anything to really focus on. So you want to find your just right. So let's say you want to choose a day called networking, right? Well, that could be too broad for you if you've got a lot of networking to do. You might want to narrow it down to, let's say relationships. Well, that means that maybe you've already done you want to focus on the relationships that you've already established, right? So that might be a little bit more narrow for you. The other thing you want to do is, number one, don't do all the days at first. It's like anything else. You don't want to try to adopt all of this all at once, because it was interesting today when I was doing my meditation. There's this the French word, and I'm going to look it up real quick because it actually fascinated me, and it's called I think it's called dépaysement, which means, and it's a phrase that the French come up with, where when you're traveling and you're in a new location, you feel kind of out of sorts and you want to retreat to safety and security, but you don't have to go anywhere to feel that. Like, if you're trying something new, you can feel that. If you were to try to theme all 7 days of your week, you would be overwhelmed by that feeling of, oh, this is not how I normally operate. And if one thing fell out of focus or got derailed, you would just, the whole house of cards, the house of cards would fall apart. You'd say, see, this doesn't work. And you'd go back to your old paths, right? Your old ways. So number one, pick one day and pick the one that's going to be the one that is going to be the simplest to stick to. So most people choose a weekend day initially, and they'll make like Saturday their household day, because they're probably already doing that anyway, right? So they're already doing house. So now they're just giving it more definition, which means if Wednesday something comes up, like the changing of a light bulb, like I've got a light bulb that's out here in my study, I don't go, oh, I got to change that, because that's what the primitive brain wants me to do. Instead, I'm like, hold on, I'll just change that it's not affecting me. I'll just change it on Saturday on my household day, right? So that's all that is. And this idea of overarching focus and giving yourself like this path with the common things that you would do in your work and your life. Because I said maintenance, it doesn't just mean work stuff. Like, I'll do maintenance stuff at home, right? I have a day called training day. Training day isn't just about training other people. Training is about training myself, right? So try to make it universal so that it can apply outside of your work. That way it becomes a way of operating. And when you start this, and you try to make it consistent, right? So every Friday is this way. And the other myth that people try to do is they try to do 7 different types of themes. I have 2 maintenance days. I have 2 training days, and I have a media day. Those are my daily themes, other than the weekend, which is family one day, planning the other. And I've been doing this for a long time, so that's why I can get away with all those days. But just start with one and see how it goes. And if you feel your days are too dynamic, don't look at the current week or even the next week. When I work with clients on this, we look like 3-4 weeks down the road, especially if there's a holiday in there, because that throws everything out of whack. So look 3-4 weeks down the road and go, oh, here's my certainties on a Wednesday. We have a lot of meetings on Wednesday. Maybe Wednesday is my day where I'll call it like shallow work day or maintenance day, because I'm in meetings a lot. And then when I'm outside of meetings, in that 30-minute window between that meeting and the next one, I go, oh, it's maintenance day. What maintenance tasks can I do? So all it does is just gives your brain a place to go. It's a filter for your focus. There are other themes that type of theming we can talk about, but I mean, you can find all this stuff through my work as well. But there's horizontal theming, which is the time of day. So some people say, I can't just wait a whole week to do writing. I need to do writing every day. Great. That's a horizontal theme. It's different than time blocking, but it does have some of the same kind of characteristics. So theming is really helpful because it gives your brain a place to go. And that's what we need in order to get the right things done.
How about some of the bad habits that you see people committing over and over again? That you used the phrase earlier of running ragged. So
Mhm.
what are some of those things that contribute to really anyone? In this context, we're talking about nonprofit leaders, but anyone. What contributes to them running ragged in an average workday?
I think one of the biggest things that they don't pay attention to is their body clock. So they try to do the wrong things at the wrong time. Uh, I'm a night owl. Talking to you right now is a perfect time because I can feed off your energy. I can feed off of this. I'm compelled to get to this level, right? But traditionally, I would be doing low energy work right now. Later in the day, that's when I hit my prime time. That's when I'm able to hit my stride. So I'll do things like right now, I'll do like a lot of noodling, a lot of reading, things like that, things that don't really require a lot of my, energy. They require my attention, but not my energy, right? And so I think a lot of people, they try to do the wrong things at the wrong time and they're not taking into account, oh, I'm a morning person. I should be tackling these heavy things early and then later in the day do these light ones, because the light ones are often quick wins, right? They're often like, I can get this done quickly. It's not about not doing those things. It's about paying attention to when you should. Energy level is often, again, another thing we don't really recognize. But we are humans, we are not machines. And the way we operate, our circadian rhythms are unique to ourselves, right? And I've had conversations, a few conversations, one with Dr. Michael Bruce, who wrote the book The Power of When. He studies this stuff. Actually, as of this recording, he's got a new book coming out about energy. Like that's one of the things that he's talking about. He's co-authored a book on that. And one of the things that comes up is this idea of, um, are you a wolf, which is me, like a night owl? Are you a lion, which means you're like an early riser? Are you a bear, which means you're more diurnal, like you're a 9 to 5er? Or are you a dolphin, which means you have sleep? You're not, you're and the reason dolphins are fascinating, because the reason he uses dolphins is they have semi-hemispheric brains, which means they're never truly completely asleep, because half their
Hmm.
brain needs to keep them awake so they don't get attacked by a shark or any of their other predators that are out there. So I think that's the biggest one. And if you start to categorize your tasks, and this would be like using modes like I talk about, or even if you want to go down the traditional path of getting things done context, like PM tasks versus AM tasks, just tagging them in that regard, again, it gives you a filter for your focus. So I would say that's one big habit. And another one that is uh, again related to energy, but it has more to do with environment, is taking breaks. Again, we're humans. Uh, I remember when I worked at the nonprofit film festival, and again, the time of year was different. During the film festival, you are running off your feet. During the actual active, I remember sleeping at the film festival office because I was the operations manager. When the film festival was running, the programmer was in charge of making sure the films were on. I was in charge of making sure people got in to see those films. I was also managing the theater. There was a lot going on. But then from basically February until the midsummer, even later than that, it was very much a let's write grants, it's a lot of admin work, which meant you spent a lot of time at your desk. And when I started working there, one of the first things I would do is during my lunch, I would go and sit in the common area. And the looks I would get from the people, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to have lunch. Oh, why don't you just eat at your desk? I'm like, because I need to step away from the desk to get my brain to start thinking about things other than the thing I was working on. Because that's when often when you step away, that's when the creative stuff can happen. That's when solutions show up, when you're not actively working on that stuff, right? So I needed to give myself not just the time to do things, but the space. And when you go for a walk, like a 15-minute walk, when you go step away from your desk for lunch and go to sit with people, or even on your own, that those 30 minutes, those 15 minutes can pay off huge. Like you talked about paying things off in dividends, like the things like capturing and journaling. Just those simple actions can pay off massively. So take those breaks and step away from the desk to go have lunch. Don't just sit at the desk to have it. I think that those are really powerful things that, again, we just don't give their just due.
And they help us to say no to things. There's so many nonprofit leaders who we love people, we love serving, we have big hearts, and it's hard to say no. But when you're attentive to the time of day, like somebody wanted to schedule something for me early in the morning one day, and I looked at them and I said, "Are you crazy? Those are my most valuable times of the day. I can't give it over to." And it wasn't that the meeting was unimportant. It was important. It's just that it would have been better for me to shift it later in the day when I could tackle some of that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
And this is really all about boundaries too, right? Like there are ways for you to do it. If you're a people pleaser like I am, like I've got my calendar blocked off that people can't book appointments with me early in the day, right? If it like you, when you sent me this invitation, that was your link. I got to, I had agency. If you had asked me, if I had given you my link, you would have seen, you first off, you would have noticed there was nothing available in the morning generally, or in the afternoon rather. But you would have seen all this open white space that you'd be like, oh, look how much I can choose from, but you don't get to see what I close off. So you can do things like create appointments in your calendar that are just for you, right? You can create a calendar link, and Cal Newport talks about this in his book, A World Without Email, like creating it so that you don't do the email that when can we meet, blah, 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 blah. There's tools that will help you with that, but not only the tools, but you can put what your intentions are in the tool. I don't want to meet with people in the afternoon. Okay, so I will make it from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock that no one can meet with me, but I've got to give enough space in the early part of the day that they can. And all of a sudden, no one says to me, wait a minute, why aren't you available in the afternoon? No one says that. They're not, don't think you're that important. Like the ego loves to play my tricks on us as well. Like, oh, I got to give myself availability in the afternoon because people will see it and they'll be all upset. And that shows up a lot of time. Like, Mike, you've already written this content. You need to create more because everyone's already seen it. That's not true at all. Most people have not. So again, don't, we tend to have this idea that we're really important and they're really paying attention to us to that degree. No, try little experiments like this. I'm going to block out my afternoons and see what happens. And again, the clues are often in what happens. If you say to your boss no, or you create a boundary and someone tries to usurp it, then that's not just the boundary that you got to pay attention, but wait a minute, it's this person that keeps trying to do this. There's some messaging there. Again, like the clue of I'll remember that. That's a clue. You pay attention to those clues, you're going to be able to craft your time better because you're going to go, okay, well, this boss, this colleague really needs my attention. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep my boundary the same with my calendar, but I'm going to create an email folder that when an email comes in from them, I'm going to drag it to that folder. That way, when I'm done processing my inbox, I can go to that folder and deal with, with that person because I know they need that. I need to isolate them. I need to make sure I give them attention and vice versa. You may find out, and I mean, that's what I found out when I was working at the film festival. It got to a point where the demands were so high, I had to make a choice. Do I stay working 40 hours for this arts organization, which I loved doing, or do I move to my online career and go down that path? And when the friction in the one job I had to leave. And it was those clues show up. If someone sends you a list of 14, another email, hey, can you do this? And you email back, don't be afraid to email back going, hey, you've given me 7 things to do. Here they all are. Which one's the most important? If they email back with, they're all important, get them done. That's a message. If they say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that you had those 7 things. Here's the rank. Here's what you really need to work on today. Or even better, hey, these are 7 things. I'm sorry, I'm going to give 2 of these to Chad because Chad could be better. Like, then you get another message. So when you start paying attention, you get to see these things both internally and externally, and that will help you figure out what to do with the time that you have.
Well, I'm glad for all of us who've learned from you over the years. I'm grateful you left the film festival and you're doing the work you're doing. And
it's so hard to watch a movie now, though, because I was we had to adjudicate and judge them. I think I've gotten through. I'm like, oh no, there's the boom. Oh, this one, I finally managed to get past that point. Of course, now I see everything related to time, so that's a whole other thing. But no, I mean, I'm glad I did too, because it was a real nice insight to see what goes on inside of a nonprofit, especially a creative nonprofit, because you've got artists, art and commerce coming together and colliding. So I got a real good perspective on that, but it also helped me realize that not everything, the way that time gets treated inside of the private and public sector, corporate and nonprofit can vary, but it also helped me design and decide, okay, how do I make this work throughout as many fields for as many people as I can. And through that experience, I was able to do what I do now for sure.
Hey, let's talk about, I want to honor your time. Let's talk about this new initiative you have called the Six. And I saw it teased online. I didn't have a chance to study it too much in depth, but I'm really intrigued. So I'm wondering if you can share with those who are at the summit more about the Six.
Sure. So when people start learning about time crafting, they're getting more of like here's a how to, like here's some of the ways: simple, flexible, durable, sustainable. Those are the ideas. But the question I would always get is, how do I know that I was productive? Like, how do I know? Like inbox zero, which I'm sure David Allen and I've had conversations about this, about what inbox zero really means. And of course, inbox zero is not what it look and do some Google inbox zero back in 2005, and you'd see what it actually means as opposed to what it means now. People often equate, like they need that quantitative edge. They need to go, okay, because the brain does love that. Like, I got it done. I got 23 things done. I got my email inbox to zero. And so I thought, well, what if I was to take the elements of time crafting or any framework that you're using and illuminate the things that were your intentions without forsaking the demands of others? Like, what does that number look like? You've heard of the 3 big rocks, but the big problem, I think, with the 3 big rocks is the word big, because we don't break those things down enough, right? The problem with like get 10 things done is that if we were to try to get our 10 things done, that can be a real challenge day to day, because we have the demands of others. I mean, look at your email inbox, right? Like, I mean, how many emails are coming from you versus from everybody else? And that can vary person to person. So I started to think about like this idea of the hexagon, because I've been kind of ruminating on it for a long time after watching. I mean, if you can look at my background, you see I've got superhero stuff, and the Vision is one of them, right? So there we go. And there was a show, WandaVision, and the hexagon was showing up everywhere. And I did research on the hexagon, and the hexagon is the most dense, with the most touch points, shape that can be extended across a plane with all the sides touching. So the triangle can do this, but it only has 3 sides and it's not as dense. The square can do this, 4 sides, not as dense. Then the hexagon, that's it. And the hexagon is used in things like, beehives, right? Like nature, it's nature's kind of preferred shape. It's also the shape in airplane wings, like, because it's strong, but that 120-degree angle makes it strong, but it's also flexible, right? So I thought, okay, what if you did 6 things? What if you just did 6 of your things per day, per week, per month? And they would obviously scale in scope. What if you had a routine builder that was 6 things, and you just want to make sure you could close the hex every time, right? What about a project? What if you could illuminate the 6 essential things inside the project that you need to work on, and then not forsake the other things that were coming at you, but at least at the end of the day, you could close the hex and go, you know what, done. So I just decided that I'm going to put out the 6. I called it the 6. And I generally put it out to my email list at first, and we did quite well. And some of the comments were, this is making productivity fun. And I was like, wait, what? Okay. Because I didn't expect that. And I've started to expand it beyond the reach of my list. You've seen it on social. I've shared it in some of my profiles, and we are adding more things to it. So there's 6 ways to do the 6. If you go to productivityist.com/the6, you'll learn, you get videos, audio, written materials, but we're adding more things to it because it's kind of taken off. And I wanted to price it in a way that it was, and you and I chatted briefly about this before we hit record, is that I think that productivity and time management often serves like the people that are at the highest level of income, the highest company level, corporate enterprise, et cetera. But my audience is generally people like me, the parent that has 2 kids, middle class, knowledge workers. They need it too, because how do the people at this level expect them to do it without having some kind of sense? But nonprofits, I mean, again, when I worked for the film festival, money was tight. Right. So how do you get things done? How do you create training and move the needle forward without spending a ton of money? So I priced the 6 at $99, and it's not going to go up in price. It will always be $99. That's the Costco $1.25 hot dog mentality, or the chicken that I think is $6.99 still. And we're adding more, like I said, we're going to add some more things to it over the course, especially over the holiday season. You're going to see a few more things pop up. But I'm excited for it. And I think that if you could close the hex daily, weekly, monthly, and look at your list and go, I got my 6 things done. There's something gratifying about that. It's a reasoned approach. It's not ruthless. Like, there's 3 realms of productivity that I talk about in my work, and it's in the book that I've been working on: ruthless, reckless, reasoned. No one wants to be reasonable, but reasoned makes sense. And if you can get 6 of your things done among all the other demands people are giving at you, I think that's a nice little goal to go for every single day. And again, these are of your things, not everything, but of your things. I think that's chef's kiss when it comes to productivity and task management.
I think I just figured out what I'm giving my staff for Christmas this year. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure nonprofit staffs all over would benefit from it. It sounds really intriguing, and I'm excited. So Mike, thanks so much for being our guest. We're grateful, and just remind folks where they can find out more about you.
You can visit productivityist.com, and at the top of the page, if you decide you want to get there's a book there called The Gift of Time. Enter your email, you can get the book, and it's a book that I wrote a few years ago. I give it away for free, and it stood the test of time, which is great. So if you want to go to productivityist.com, you just enter your email at the top, and then you'll get regular email updates about the 6 and other things that we do. And also, if you want to find me on social, I'm at Mike Vardy on social, or at Productivityist. I'm all over the internets. So and I have a podcast too, a Productive Conversation. I should actually have you on the podcast, Mike. I don't think I've had you on the podcast yet, have I?
I don't think so. I'd love to be on it.
Consider this a public invitation in 2022 to appear on a Productive Conversation, because I think we've had a productive conversation today, and I want to have one that I can share with my audience as well.
Thanks again, Mike.